Hi guys, I'm back again for another short video. Now I just wanted to talk about how crack has changed over the years. Now in the 1980s and the 1990s, when the dealers used to manufacture these drugs, they used to put more cocaine and less cutting agents like bicarb and all the things that they put in to actually cook the crack. Now the addicts from the 80s and the 90s used to really appreciate the drugs. Because I don't know whether many of you know about drugs manufacturing, but the fact is that these drugs can be made in the house. Now, for example, let's just say I'm your average crack dealer, okay? I'm cooking up crack right here on my kitchen stove. Now, there's two ways to cook crack up. You can cook it up on your kitchen stove, or you can cook it up in the microwave. Now, me personally, okay, I prefer to cook it up on the cooker, because if you cook crack up on the cooker, the strength is more and the customers appreciate how strong it is. Whereas if you cook crack up in the microwave, what happens is, if you leave it in for 1, 2, 3 seconds more than what you're supposed to, by the time these drugs are distributed to the clientele complain, oh, I didn't really get that much of a long enough buzz, it's not powerful enough. But in those days, I find that the dealers had more respect for the customer, because they saw it as, well, the addicts spend quite a lot of money with us, so it's only fair that these drugs are powerful. Now, the addicts in the 80s and 90s were quite different to the addicts we see today on Mr. Daddy Tommy Reed's channel. Because a lot of these addicts were functioning addicts. They had houses, they had jobs, they had cars. From the outside looking in, a lot of people wouldn't know that they were actually smoking crack pipes. So because the strength of the drugs in the 80s and the 90s was stronger, the addicts didn't need to take as much. For example, your average addict in the 80s and 90s would buy 2 crack rocks at £20 to make £40 3 times a week. And the minute those drugs were dropped off, they'd have 1 pipe. It'd be that powerful, they wouldn't even be able to finish that single pipe. They'd have to put it down and then go back to it. So then the drugs would last all night, which means they don't have to think about robbing, they don't have to think about selling sex, they can hold on to their jobs, hold on to their kids. Now, the drugs in the year 2019, in this day and age, from what I've seen, the dealers don't give a flying you know what when they cook these drugs up, because when they're cooking the crack up on the kitchen stove, from what I've seen, they're putting more bicarb, more cutting agents than what they are the cocaine. So what happens is, by the time this crack is being distributed to the addicts, they have 1 pipe, guess what, they want another directly after. Instead of them being like the old school addicts from the 80s and 90s, where they spend £40 a night, 3 nights a week, these lot from this day and age will spend £300 every single night, because when they're smoking the crack, it's all being cut. So they're just chasing and chasing and chasing. They'll have one after the other. And this is what I can see is happening with these girls in Detroit. Whoever's distributing these drugs are all being caught, because all these girls have come out and said they stay up night after night after night smoking these drugs. They wouldn't have done that in the 80s and 90s. It would have been too powerful for them, and they would have kept on to their families, their kids and their jobs. So I just wanted to explain to you guys how drugs, especially crack, has changed from the 1980s right up to the year 2019. I seriously believe if these girls in Detroit would have been around in the 80s and 90s, they would have been what you call functioning adults.